John Kirby is currently addressing the press. Let's listen in.
On the ongoing talks to extend the pause. He and his entire national security team will obviously stay engaged on this over the coming days as we work to implement this extension of the original agreement, as well as efforts to extend the pause even from there. Just a quick update on the figures. As of the morning of November 26, 200 trucks were dispatched to the Rafah crossing, and 137 trucks of supplies were offloaded by the United Nations reception point in Gaza, making it the biggest humanitarian convoy received since the 7th of October. And this brings the total number of trucks of aid and assistance, including fuel, to over 2,000 since the 21st of October. Our team has prioritized getting this much-needed relief into Gaza to alleviate the suffering of Palestinian civilians there. Of course, most of them have nothing to do with Hamas. And to date, we have assisted over 840 Americans and their families who have departed and sought the support of our team on the ground in Egypt. And with that, take some questions.
Thank you, Admiral. A few things here. The president called conditional aid for Israel a worthwhile thought. Is he actually considering conditioning aid or not?
What he also said, right after acknowledging that it was a worthwhile thought, was that the approach he has chosen to take so far has produced results and outcomes. Many of them I just walked you through in my opening statement. So the approach that we're taking with Israel, and quite frankly with our partners in the region, is working. It's getting aid into people that need it. It's getting a pause in the fighting. It's getting hostages out. It's getting Americans out. And quite frankly, we continue to urge and will continue to urge the Israelis as they conduct military operations to do so with the utmost care for innocent civilian life.
The Democrats in his party who say we need to start conditioning aid going forward, what would he say?
I think he would say exactly what he said to y'all yesterday when he got asked this question. It's a worthwhile thought, but the approach that I'm taking now is working. The approach that we're taking now is working. It's getting results.
The increasing dangers to U.S. military personnel in the Gulf. I know you outlined in a series of appearances this morning what happened. But are we to continue seeing this sort of, well, let me put it this way, is that strategy of dealing with it as it happens going to continue to be the strategy? You've seen some say there should perhaps be a more robust response to these ongoing attacks, whether it's from Iranian-backed militias in Syria or Iraq, whether it's the Houthis. Is there any thought of changing up how that's done?
I don't think we're going to get in the business of telegraphing our punches, Ed. We've responded forcefully against the threats to our forces in Iraq and Syria, and now our forces in the Gulf region, the Gulf of Oman, Gulf of Aden, will continue to do that as appropriate.
Is striking in Yemen still an option?
Again, I'm not going to telegraph punches. We will take the steps appropriate to protect our troops and our forces in the Middle East region. I would add that the Mason is attached to the USS Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, which the president dispatched to the region specifically to address the increase in the tensions.
Any possibility that Americans will be among the 20 that we release over the next few days?
Well, we certainly hope so. I mean, we're going to watch this very, very closely. We're certainly hoping that another batch of hostages gets released today as part of the fourth and final day of the original agreement. We're going to be watching closely to see if any Americans are in that group. As it has come out over the last 3 days, we don't really know until you get into the end game who's going to be actually on that list, and then even then you got to watch closely to seeing if who's on the list is the folks that actually come out. So we're watching and hoping.
And you spoke of the president's conversation at a critical moment to break that impasse. Can you talk a little more about what that impasse was and how that was broken in his conversations?
I mean, it came down to, you're talking about over the weekend, yeah. It was really more about the lists and who was on it, and I don't want to get into more detail than that. It's a similar issue to what we face today. The reason why there's been a little bit of a delay because there was a difference of a view, if you might, over the list, and the fact that mothers were not originally going to be allowed to come out with their children. Now that's been resolved. So it really had to do with the who.
And very, very quickly, the newly elected leader of Argentina says he's coming to the U.S., also to D.C. Any meetings scheduled with administration officials, with the president, with anybody else while he's here?
Yes, President-elect Mullen will be coming to Washington, D.C., largely to meet with the IMF over and the World Bank over of their fiscal and economic issues. But while he's here in town, he'll have a chance to meet with some National Security Council folks, including Jake Sullivan.
No plans to meet with the president, right?
No plans to meet with the president. The president will, as you think you know, be on travel in the middle of the week.
Thank you. On the remaining Americans who are being held, do you have any more clarity on whether they're being held by Hamas or with one of these other terrorist groups?
No.
And, all along you've been very clear about concerns that a broader ceasefire would only benefit Hamas. Sullivan was pretty clear yesterday in saying that, Hamas has been able to gain some benefit from this. How concerned are you that the longer this truce lasts, now 6 days, that Hamas will benefit? And how do you weigh that?
It's a real risk. You have to expect a group like Hamas, a terrorist group, which clearly doesn't abide by laws of war, will try to take advantage of any pause in the fighting for their own benefit. So we're watching that closely, as well as our Israeli counterparts. You can bet that they're watching that closely. And I don't want to speak for the Israelis, but I mean, this is a calculated risk that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war cabinet are willing to take in order to get those hostages out. So it's a balance. And as you've also heard the Israelis say, that once the pauses are over, they intend to go right back at military operations.
And when you say that Hamas has been able to get some benefits so far, is that restocking, resupplying? What is that benefit?
I would just say that, without getting into intelligence issues, that any pause in the fighting could benefit your enemy in terms of time to refit, to rest your fighters, to rearm them, re-equip them. A pause in the fighting can be seen as a benefit. But I want to stress, and this was always part of the calculus, any discussion of pauses was always part of the calculus, that Hamas might try to benefit from it. But so too have the Israeli people benefited by the return of their loved ones and hostages. So too have the American people benefited now with little Abigail back with her family. So again, it's a balance. Again, I won't speak for the Israeli Defense Forces, but when these pauses are over, then they have made it very clear that they're going to continue to target Hamas leadership.
John, how many Americans are still being held hostage, and do you have proof of life?
We think the number is, it's less than 10, probably in the neighborhood of, about 8 to 9. But we don't necessarily have firm, solid information on each and every one of them.
And why haven't the 2 American women who are with Abigail, what happened with them? Why haven't they been released?
Well, we certainly hope that we'll see them in hopefully today. And if not today, certainly over the next couple of days. We want to see them back with their families where they belong as well. The lists are developed by Hamas, and then, of course, the Israelis develop their list of Palestinian prisoners that they're going to release. And we're not involved in the specific drafting of the lists and the determination on Hamas's side of who's going to come out on any given day. Obviously, we want to see those 2 American women released as soon as possible.
And the truce being extended 2 days, what happens now? Do you want to get like 3 days next, or a permanent truce? What's the thing?
It's like I said in my opening statement, Steve. We're grateful that we've got an extra 2 days to work with here. That'll result in the release of 20 more individuals, yes, women and children. And as I said right at the top, we'd certainly like to see even that extension extended further until all the hostages are released. That's really the goal here: get all the hostages home with their families where they belong, and however long that could take. Mm-hmm.
All right, that is White House spokesperson John Kirby giving a brief at the White House, saying that the approach that the United States and other Arab countries are taking on the Israel-Hamas conflict is working. Protecting the troops in the Middle East region is their priority. They are hoping that Americans will be part of the list of the hostages that will be released after the truce was extended. America is watching closely on the risks or benefits that will emerge after the ceasefire or truce is over. He also says that over 250 trucks have let in or have been let in to Gaza in terms of aid. And finally, he did say that less than 10 Americans are being held hostage by Hamas, but no details about their information or names have been given. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.